Greetings and welcome to this week's edition of Spotlight on Siouxland. I'm your host, Paul Guggenheimer. Thanks for making us a part of your weekend on these Clear Channel radio stations in Sioux City. It is spring and it is a busy time of year up at Western Iowa Tech Community College. That's where they're going to be hosting a couple of big events this spring. One, a radio play in their black box theater space, something that they've done in the past. But for the first time ever, WIT will be hosting a stage play in their black box theater space. It's The Drunkard. It's the first time ever that WIT has done this, and here to tell us more about it and other things as well is Western Iowa Tech Humanities Department Chair Ralph Swain. Ralph, welcome back to the program. How are you?
I'm very good, Paul.
Tell us a little bit about the groundbreaking play, The Drunkard, that WIT students will be performing.
As you said, it's the first time that we've had an on-stage play at WIT. And, of course, the fairly new, it's a year old now, Black Box Theater, which is a wonderful small venue and very intimate. And I think it's going to be an enjoyment to see our students involved in a totally student-produced and acted play. And we will be performing 2 nights in May. The 9th and the 10th, which is a Friday and a Saturday. And basically the students, other students, voted on this particular play. They looked at maybe half a dozen and selected The Drunkard, which takes place in the mid-19th century, 1850, 1860 period. So we've had several rehearsals. We'll have many more to come. A number of the students have never been in a play before, so and that's a particular challenge for them and, of course, for the director, yourself. But it is, they're very excited, very enthused. The whole cast has been put together.
And that's very important. And again, this will be staged when?
It will be May
9th and 10th?
9th and...
As I see it here on my sheet.
Friday and a Saturday.
Yes.
In the evening, both cases will be an evening performance. So
folks can get up there and see that, and this is going to be done in a space that nobody, I don't know if you would have even thought of doing theater in this particular room even just a couple of years ago. Describe how that space is developed so that it can be used in this way.
Well, way last spring, that 44 by 48 foot space with 17-foot ceilings was packed with used file cabinets, desks, office dividers, and so forth. And it was basically a storage space. And before that, a number of years before that, it was a machine shop for Western Iowa Tech. So what it had was a lot of 120, 220 electrical outlets all across the ceiling. And when I saw that space, I said, what a ideal location to have a small black box theater. And so within a couple of months after I suggested it to President Bob Dunker, we had an auction. All the storage items were sold off on a Saturday afternoon. Another month passed and it was painted black. And since then, we have installed a lighting grid. We have brand new theater lighting. We have a new stage. We have seating and new seats, very comfortable seats. And we're keeping it as a pure black box, which means nothing is built in. So we can strike the stage, we can strike the seating, we can have theater in the round, we can have any type of configuration. The play that's coming up, we're not even using a stage. The actors will be right on the floor surface. But because of the dimensions and the seating arrangement, it is a very intimate space in which every single patron who is sitting in the audience will have a perfect unobstructed view and be quite close to the actors.
And how is it set up as far as lights and sound and all the things that you need to do a stage production?
Well, when I ordered the lighting, I got the traditional stage cans, which are called par 64 can lights, which you can put different colored gels in front. But also, you have to have some other items. You have to have, for example, ellipsoidal spots. So we have two ellipsoidal spots, which accommodate a grid, a design pattern made out of metal that fits in front of the light. And then you can adjust the size and the intensity of the light and actually create different types of shadow patterns in the background to have kind of a subliminal, surreal, impressionistic lighting pattern for the audience that can simulate the environment of the actors. So we'll use that. We have some curtains, standing curtains that we can use for side wings and a large curtain in the back. But we don't have draw curtains like a traditional stage, proscenium stage would have. Very flexible space.
Fabulous. That sounds exciting, and I'm sure folks will be looking forward to seeing it. And the old-fashioned melodramas. I didn't think there were that many people still doing them, but you mentioned that at Wayne State they have a group that does them there.
I know that for years the Wayne State players perform melodrama. I am not sure if they're still doing that genre, but they actually had a traveling troupe that would go around the tri-state area and put on very traditional melodrama. And I attended several of those, one staged outside Jefferson, South Dakota in the woods on a beautiful autumn day, and it was wonderful. They did multiple performances, and people could come and sit down on little stumps that were set up to sit down in the theater area, and really enjoyed it. So this particular play, as I said, is the period of the mid-19th century, so costuming is important. Fortunately, there's only 5 characters in it, 3 men and 2 women, so it won't be an exorbitant effect to try to get the period costumes of that time.
And describe for people who don't know what melodrama is, describe exactly how that works.
There's a lot of audience participation from the standpoint that the actors throughout the play will glance at the audience, face the audience, and deliver their lines, which is called an aside, which the characters on the stage realistically don't hear what that person's saying to the audience, and the audience can giggle and laugh, and in some cases, when there's really a terrible villain, they can hiss and boo. It's a very lighthearted, informal type of production, but at the same time has a very serious theme. This is a morality play. This deals with a gentleman taking advantage of 2, quote, helpless women, and the social mores of that time are certainly reflected in this whole thing, and it has to do with someone who's drinking too much alcohol, and the key role of that individual, that person actually lured into an alcoholic stupor. And so it's something that I think probably a lot of people today may have not seen.
Yeah, and it was a staple of the stage years ago, and there probably were a number of those, back when the Orpheum was just starting and was a new theatrical venue 80 years ago.
In the days of vaudeville, which again the Orpheum opened originally the early 20s as a vaudeville theater, they would put in a short act or a skit that was taken from the melodramas.
And so it's maybe WIT can help revive that, just as it's revived its black box theater space. Now, as I mentioned, there has been radio drama performed there, and you've got another spring show coming. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this will be our fifth onstage production. Two of those were done in the Orpheum Theater, and we've done three at the Black Box, including a Christmas show, and we did a premiere show, and now we're going to do this particular show that's coming up, two-night run at the end of April 23rd and 24th, which is a Thursday and a Friday, and they will. If I'm correct, it might be.
Yes, it is. 24th and 25th.
24th and 25th.
That's what it says on this sheet.
There you go. 24th and 25th.
Glad you brought this press release.
Well, you're hiding that from me.
I'm sorry.
I don't have my glasses on. Anyway, so this is going to be The Third Man. It's a classic story, and there was a movie made in 1949, starring Orson Welles and Joseph Cotten, and it really hit the world by storm, particularly the musical theme, which was played on a zither, which propelled this unknown zither player in Vienna to world recognition. The Third Man theme made top of the pop charts in the early 50s. And, of course, the radio play was aired in 1951. But the movie that came out in 1951.
And the radio play, I think, was
49.
It came out before it?
No, you're right.
I think it was the other way around.
The movie was in 49, and the radio play was in 51.
Right. Yeah, this was one of those that the radio play actually, in a lot of cases, popular movies were made into radio plays, but there have been some cases, sorry, wrong number being one of them, where the radio play was so popular it was made into a movie. But this was capitalizing on the success of The Third Man, and as you say, Orson Welles, a big-name actor who was no stranger to radio drama, and he was in this along with Joseph Cotten. And this movie, really, it has resonated with people for decades, and it was voted by the British film industry the top film of the 20th century, and has caught people's fancy so much that WIT is actually doing a Third Man week, correct?
Yes. In fact, the night before our opening performance, which would be Wednesday the 23rd, we're showing the film, and that film will be shown in the large lecture hall, just hop, skip, and a jump from the Black Box Theater in the main building at Western Iowa Tech. So that film will be shown on Wednesday night on April 23rd. The interesting thing is that this period of time was post-World War II Vienna, when there was the city was still bombed out from the bombing of the Allies against the Nazis, who had taken control of Vienna and Austria, and a lot of black market activities and illegal actions by many people taking advantage of the war-torn Vienna. So that's kind of the theme of this story. Traditionally, with our group, the nonprofit Great Plains Radio Theater Project, we always do a major production in the beginning, and then we have intermission, and then we follow up with a much shorter radio play. The Third Man is a fairly heavy theme, so we're going to end with a little more tongue-in-cheek, lighthearted detective story, which aired in 1949 in November.
And before we get into that, yeah. I'm not done talking about The Third Man here. Well, what in your estimation, when you break that film down and you break down the story, which works as well on the radio as it did on screen, what is it about that story that resonates so strongly with people in terms of the statement that it makes about the post-war world? And really, I mean, we're still living in the post-World War II world.
Well, it shows that as in any wars and post-war period, there's greed, there's intrigue, there's opportunities to make money, and there's unfortunately, in the case of the third man, there were 4 different nations that had divided up Vienna, just like Berlin, and each one had its own political agenda to follow, and it really reflects on the fact that the general public suffered the most, as they always do. The civilians always suffer, and of course those who died in combat. And I don't know if you can draw parallels. It's going to be interesting to see the audience reaction, and maybe draw some parallels to what has happened in the world today with regards to other countries going into another country to try to administer the politics and everything else, and all the problems attendant with that.
That's a great point, and there's a lot of lines from that movie that stand out. One of the ones that kind of stands out for me is when Harry Lime is on the Ferris wheel with Holly Martin's the main character, and Harry Lime has become such an iconic character. But he's telling Holly about this black market stuff that he's involved with, and he's trying to. His friend can't believe that he's doing something so nasty, running a penicillin racket, as it turns out, and he says. Harry says at one point, governments have their 5-year plans. I have mine. The governments have the people and talk about the people in the proletariat. I talk about the suckers and the mugs. It sort of, really kind of sums up mid to late 20th century and early 21st century society. This seems to be such a predatory world that we live in.
The old saying, dog-eat-dog world, is so applicable, and it has been around ever since politics was around, and it's no different now. You have more of a free media that occasionally exposes that, but then again, you have, to a certain extent, an apathetic public, too, that is either incredulous that anything like that can happen, or it just simply doesn't care.
Are we getting out of our apathy now, maybe, with the way the political, there's a lot of passion toward that? I think people are getting a little tired of the presidential race, but there seems to be a lot more interest and passion than there has been in a long, long time.
Yes, really. If you look at what's happening on both the Democrat and Republican races, it's really pulled in a lot of people that I think normally would not be involved or voicing their opinions about politics in general, and the presidential race in particular.
You're listening to Spotlight on Siouxland. Our guest is Ralph Swain. He is the chair of the Humanities Department at Western Iowa Tech Community College. I'm your host, Paul Guggenheimer. Again, thanks for joining us on this Sunday morning on these Clear Channel radio stations. Ralph, you mentioned that there's just to lighten the mood here a little bit, you mentioned that there is a second show to go along with The Third Man, and tell us about that one.
Well, the second show follows Intermission. I might just mention quickly Intermission. Great Plains Radio Theater has a tradition now of having a nice 15-20-minute intermission with complimentary desserts. And the dessert is going to be homemade Viennese strudel, which, of course, relates to the Third Man's location in Vienna. The title of the half-hour detective program is called Devil in the Deep Freeze, which was part of a 2-year run series called Candy Madsen. And Candy Madsen was a female private detective from San Francisco. She had an apartment on Telegraph Hill. She carried a gun. She had a sidekick by the name of Rembrandt Watson. And basically every episode, and there were about close to 90 episodes, that she it's just a very entertaining, tongue-in-cheek, lots of humor in it, but also a serious undertone. And that series ran for 2 years without a sponsor. So KGO San Francisco were the studios where Candy Matson was produced. Natalie Masters was the actress who played Candy Matson. Her husband, Monty Masters, wrote all the scripts. And he preceded her in death by about 10 years. I think she died in about 1987. So it was a West Coast exclusive broadcast through the NBC network.
I got to hand it to you. You dug out this show that probably people, only radio drama aficionados would have known about.
Yes, there weren't that many back in the 1940s and early 50s. There weren't that many detective shows that starred a female character, and certainly a female detective.
So how did you find this?
Good with a gun. Well, I just do a lot of hunting on the internet and searching, and then I got there's a number of books that I ordered on interlibrary loan that are encyclopedias. And actually Candy Matson I discovered not through the internet, but a little entry in a huge volume of compendium of early radio shows, and I read the short description, and it really piqued my interest. So I started searching on the internet and came up with this. I have not been able to find a photo of Candy, of Natalie Masters, and I've even written some of the top old-time radio buffs that are out there on the internet, and they said we have not found one either.
Wow.
She went on to not star, but be usually a second actress in many, many television series.
Is that right?
Yes, including Dragnet. And then there was one film that she was in, and I went to Netflix and I have ordered it because I know her character's name. So once that movie arrives, I'm very curious to see her. It's a minor role, but
what year would it have been?
This would have been about, I think it was in the 80s.
We're not
early 80s. But I just want to see.
That's not going to show her in her sexy prime.
It won't. I don't know how to get an image of it.
I bet you if you wrote the San Francisco Chronicle or the Examiner, that would be...
that might be one way to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe even KGO San Francisco, which is still... but they may not keep records.
There. That stuff, man, that stuff's buried in vaults. Although we still have a picture of the Hit Parade guys from the old... KMNS 620 on the wall here in our Clear Channel studios. So you never know what you might find in the archives.
Right.
So good luck with that. Let's talk a little bit about switching gears here. You've been on the show in the past, and you've talked about, as a Vietnam veteran yourself, you have talked about various things that have been done to help people remember, understand, and come to grips with the Vietnam War, including the memory wall, which was brought here. You were involved in that. You went to the anniversary dedication for the Vietnam Memorial Wall last October.
November, the 25th anniversary of the construction of the Vietnam Memorial Wall. I was brought out with a number of volunteers from around the country to read names. It took 4 days to read all the 58,000 plus names of all the dead whose names are on the wall. And I had received an invitation from the Vietnam Memorial Wall Foundation that there is a trip planned to Vietnam in August, and I'm seriously looking at that and investigating my ability to go on that. This is a very special trip because it's going to be 10 days with Jan Scruggs, who was the founder of the Vietnam Memorial Wall. He's a Vietnam veteran, wounded Vietnam vet, disabled. Without Jan, we would not have a Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. And the other person accompanying this group will be the former ambassador to Vietnam, a gentleman by the name of Michael Marine, who, interesting, his last name is Marine, and he was a Marine who served in Vietnam. So he was a Vietnam veteran.
I can just imagine the sergeant, or when he is saying, "What's your name, Marine?" Marine. Okay.
Yeah. He He probably got a lot of ribbing in basic training.
I'll bet.
But anyway, his term expired in 2007. There's a new ambassador of Vietnam whose first name is also Michael, but it's Michael Michalak. And he, my research in his biography, he's not a Vietnam vet. He's kind of a career diplomat. But this is a trip that would include going to Hanoi first and actually meeting some high-ranking officials of the Vietnamese government, and then going down into Quang Tri province to visit a village where the Vietnam veterans have assisted in this tribal group up in the mountains to construct a community center and some other social service facilities. And we'll go all through the country and head all the way down to Saigon, which is called Ho Chi Minh City, but most of the people there still refer to it as Saigon, which was kind of my stomping grounds, that whole Saigon area. So, and I'm really looking forward to that, and I haven't completely finalized everything yet for the trip, but that would be August 1st through the 10th.
And how big a group is this that's going over?
It won't be a huge delegation. It may be 30, 35.
So not a really big group at all.
No.
And you've got the former U.S. ambassador to Vietnam going with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are wondering what would make a guy who went to Vietnam and probably, didn't particularly enjoy it. I mean, it was not an easy place to be, especially when you're fearing for your life. What would make a guy want to go back there?
I almost went back shortly after I got out of the Army to go back as a correspondent. In fact, I had a lot of my papers lined up to go back, and then graduate school got in the way, and the war was wrapping up and ending, so I didn't head back there. I left in 1970, and we were out of there in 73 before it collapsed in 1975. But since that time, I've always wanted to go back to the country, because even during war, it was a beautiful tropical country, and I really loved the Vietnamese culture, because I was fortunate enough to be able to fraternize, as they say in the military, with Vietnamese, which a lot of soldiers couldn't or weren't allowed to do, and developed a real sense of love for the culture. And I'm Japanese American, I'm half Japanese, so the Asian culture in particular was of interest to me, and I love the food. Several of my Vietnam veteran friends have been back, some of them multiple times, and their reports are just fantastic, that they've had wonderful times there, treated very, very well by the people. Particularly if you're an American, and even more so if you're an American Vietnam veteran. They are very, very friendly and open to former soldiers who were former enemy, because they say that their enemy was the American government, not the American people, and they tell the veterans who return. And they understand that they were soldiers doing the duty just like they were. So it's an amazing turnaround for many of the veterans that go back there, and I'm excited to go back.
And what does this bring, do you think, in terms of closure for that?
I saw a lot of destruction in Vietnam. I saw a lot of suffering. I was attached to the 3rd Field Hospital just in an area called Tan Son Nhut, not too far from Saigon. And, to be able to go back and see the country healed, and that's what I'm told, it's completely healed. The scars, by and large, are gone. At least the environmental scars. Certainly, the physical scars are still there. Lots of amputees and people suffering from second generation of birth defects from Agent Orange defoliant that was sprayed on,
which has affected some soldiers,
and
U.S. soldiers.
Yes. Many American soldiers were affected by Agent Orange exposure also, which is a dioxin, very toxic.
And what was it sprayed on?
It was sprayed on jungles. It was sprayed on shrubbery, grass, anything to deprive the enemy of cover. Unfortunately, it had dioxin in it. It was banned in the United States during the period of the Vietnam War when they discovered the toxicity, and so no American farmer was allowed to use that compound, but they continued to use it in Vietnam, and unfortunately, the American soldiers and Air Force members were exposed, in many cases, quite heavily to Agent Orange.
And it affected some of the Vietnamese. So,
yes.
So just in terms of going back and just gaining closure,
I need to be able to verify what many of my friends have said about their return to Vietnam. I didn't suffer as much as some people did in Vietnam, but I saw a lot of suffering, and I want to see that.
Ralph Swain has been our guest, Vietnam veteran and the chair of the Humanities Department at Western Iowa Tech Community College. Ralph, thanks for stopping in. It's always a fascinating visit with you.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Paul.
And I am Paul Guggenheimer, and this has been Spotlight on Siouxland on these Clear Channel radio stations in Sioux City. We'll see you next week.